everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and right there is Nikki Kinzer.
I think, if I'm not on mute.
No, you're definitely
okay.
here. Oh, yes.
All right. Hello.
Unless you're in my head.
That's right.
Nikki Kinzer, the voice in my head.
Sometimes I hear that from clients. They'll say, I can hear you talking to me.
That's
I'm like, I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's not always good.
That's right.
We are talking about building habits for self-care today. One of the most important things you can do for yourself to take care of yourself is to figure out the mechanics that help you best cement new behaviors. Before we get into that, head over to takecontroladhd.com, get to know us a little bit better, listen to the show right there on the website, or subscribe to the mailing list right there on the homepage, and you can get an email with the latest episode each week. Connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at TakeControlADHD, and call us at 503-664-4ADD. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, if you are an iTunes user, if you head into iTunes, search for Take Control in the podcast directory and leave us a review. It really helps others to find the show. We appreciate your help there. Okay, so we have some follow-up from last week. We did the digital episode last week, if you recall.
Yes.
You survived?
I did. It was fun. I keep thinking about Zombie Run, and I was telling my family about it, and I'm cracking up as I'm telling them about it, and I don't think anybody thought it was as funny as I did.
You maybe have a little bit of the gallows humor to you. They don't quite understand it. Well, I also think it's fun, so you may be alone, but you are not alone.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we have this follow-up. It was on the digital episode. I am bullish on alerts and reminders and many of the tools. It felt like I think that the case I was making was you should set reminders and alerts about everything in the world that you possibly ever want to do ever. And that's what this feedback sort of implies. And so here it is. The listener says, I listened to the podcast yesterday and I have to comment. First, measuring almost everything in my life became almost a full-time endeavor. At first, it seemed necessary, but after a couple of weeks, I became a slave to the app's measurements. The results did not matter so much. Second, all the alarms became distracting, much like Facebook notifications. Reminders are great for the important things, but I have found visual cues, such as my water bottle on my desk and the scale in front of the refrigerator, to be better than dings on my phone for me. My attention is already in short supply. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that is absolutely right. And clearly that doesn't, having too many alerts became overwhelmed for this person. And I am not saying you should measure everything in your life. I'm saying you should measure and find alerts for the things you want to change. And as soon as you have too many measurements and alerts going on, you become oversaturated. And that's not a good thing either. So you really have to know yourself. What do you want to change? And how do you got to try the different methods for figuring out how to keep these things in front of your face. I think it's important to note that visual cue reminders, digital reminders, are also visual cues when you do it right. That's the connection, and that having your water bottle, when I get an alert that says, hey, drink more water, it reminds me to go get my water bottle, even if it's not always sitting right in front of me, because it's not always sitting right in front of me. So watch those alerts. That is an important bit of reminder, a bit of advice. Don't oversaturate yourself. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that the alarms, if you have too many of them, they do become distracting and they start to not mean anything. So definitely I agree with that. And I actually really like her ideas on the visual cues. I mean, I know that that's not tech related, but I the water bottle on the desk is actually a great idea. And the scale in front of the refrigerator, brilliant. I mean, that's going to make you think twice, so, I think it's a good point, and I'm glad that she wrote in, and I think it's good reminders.
I do too, and I would add to that visual cue on the water bottle thing. If you really want to fix that, you have to put a water bottle everywhere that you normally exist. Mm-hmm. So I have a water bottle on my bedside table that never leaves my bedside table. I have one in my office that doesn't leave my office until I have to go fill it up. Like water devices are everywhere if that's a habit you want to cement. And so, that's visual cues are super useful. So I think that's
Absolutely.
Important. Yeah. Okay, so I felt like that bit of follow-up in particular was a great segue to what you want to talk about today, which is nippy.
Well, not only the follow-up, but I think just the actual show from what we were talking about last week with habits and then going into this show, it was definitely, they're connected. And I found this great book that I want to talk about a little bit. But yeah, it's about habits, right? Because we've been talking about all of these great topics, from sleep to exercise, drinking more water, all of these different things. And coming up, we're going to we still have a show on nutrition and how to have more fun in your life with ADHD. So I'm really looking forward to those. And we've got a couple of new guests coming too. So that's fun.
Excellent.
But yeah, I definitely thought, with planning today, it's a good time to just sort of stop and pause and review some ideas and thoughts around building habits. Because that's what all of this is about.
Truly.
Really is incorporating these wonderful strategies and things that we've been talking about into our life on a long-term basis. We don't want them just short-term. We want them long-term. And, to do that, it means you have to create a habit, right? You got to do it every day.
Yes, every day. Figure it out.
Yeah. However, I have to say, when you look at these shows and you look at how many strategies and ideas we did come up with, it can be a little overwhelming to try to, think you're going to tackle it all. And so I don't want you to. I don't want you to try to tackle all of this. I want to set you up for frustration, or not set you up for frustration.
Set you up for frustration. You're the worst coach ever. What?
I'm so awful. No, I want to set you up for success. Jeez, that's what I mean, success. So, we talked about habits. Actually, I looked at the show notes. It was a couple of years ago, if you can believe that.
Oh my goodness.
And we did 2 shows, and we did it around the book, The Power of Habit, which is still a great book and highly recommend it. But like I said at the beginning of the show, I recently came across this other book that I've really enjoyed. And it follows kind of the same line of thinking as I do when I work with my own habits, but when I work with clients too. And that's to set them up for success, not frustration. But what that is starting small, right? So the book itself is called Many Habits, Smaller Habits, Bigger Results. And it's by Stephen Guise. And, the title basically says it, right? Smaller habits, bigger results. And there's a few things that I really like about the book, but one, I think it's really easy to read and it's not that long.
That's the best kind of book.
It really is, right? I mean, big, huge win in my life when the book is not that long. And it was a pleasant surprise to see, I read it on my iPad and you can see like how many minutes you have left. Like they can estimate how many more minutes you have to read this book.
That is the best feature.
Yes. And it only said an hour. I was like, right on. I can finish this book. Not right now, but I will finish it, within the next week at least. So that was exciting. It also resonated with me right away because I think it comes from a really positive place. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. And there are ideas that you can implement like right away. So I have a few key points that really resonated with me that I wanted to share with our audience. Are you ready?
I am absolutely ready.
Okay. So, first to just kind of explain what a mini habit is. I know it seems simple, but I just want to use his example because it just is so clear to me. His example of a mini habit is to just do 1 push-up a day. So say that your long-time goal is you want to exercise. And we talked about exercise. It'd be great to get 30 minutes a day in if you can. But what he's saying is start with this mini habit of just doing 1 push-up a day. And you can't fail when you're only doing 1 push-up a day. And so a mini habit around any of our self-care series could be, practicing mindfulness for just 1 minute. I'm sure that Miss Dixon would probably agree.
Absolutely.
But just do it for 1 minute. Anyway, you can do a push-up. You can practice mindfulness for 1 minute. You can't fail. It's setting you up for success. It doesn't take a lot of motivation or willpower to do either task. And so what I see with myself and with my clients is that we tend to think we're thinking small, that our mini habits feel like they're good. Like, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to do 30 minutes of exercise, but I'm going to do 15. But 15 is still too big. Like we're still not doing it.
Yeah,
So
right.
I think that's the challenge that we see, is that we're still thinking too big. So we need to even go smaller. So that's just kind of something to think about. That was something that really resonated with me. To just choose something that you absolutely can do every day. And 15 minutes might be too long, but doing one push-up, you can do, which is big.
Absolutely.
So he mentions, or I mentioned earlier, about motivation and willpower, and he has this whole section of the book where he talks about these two things. And this was really interesting to me because he talks about motivation and how motivation is not enough to make something into a habit, that it's based on emotion. It's how we feel that day. Sometimes we're really motivated and sometimes we're not. And those days that we're not motivated, it is not enough to pretend like we're motivated or to try to be motivated to actually follow through with whatever we're trying to do.
Right.
And, I thought that was really interesting that, motivation alone is not a good enough a strategy to build this new habit. But willpower, he's saying, is more reliable. Because no matter how you feel, you can make yourself do something, whether you are motivated to do it or not. If you force yourself to do that one push-up, you can do it. And he talks about it being like a muscle. And, that resonated with me right away, Pete, because we always talk about how, organizing is like, a muscle.
Right, right, right.
It strengthens over time. I mean, so many things is like, so many things are like that. And so that's what he's saying too, is that over time, your willpower will feel stronger. But I'm reading this, of course, from a standpoint of ADHD. And I'm thinking, well, you can't just tell somebody to do something, willpower, just give it your all, Pete. You can have willpower, do it. That's still not going to necessarily help you. Mm-hmm. So what I like about these mini habits is that the action, again, is so small that you don't actually have to have a lot of willpower to do it, because it's so small. It doesn't take a lot of willpower or motivation. One push-up a day, anybody can do.
That this behavioral change, I can't remember. Did I talk about tiny habits and BJ Fogg recently? It feels like I may have brought it up.
I don't remember.
So mini habits, tiny habits, they're kind of part of the gestalt of making small daily changes that make big change in your life. And one of the things that I think is really important is to talk about how you take this habit and how you integrate it into your life. How do you take this? So I'm the ultimate slacker when it comes to, let's say, doing push-ups. How do I actually integrate this mini habit into my daily, weekly, monthly routine?
Right. Well, and I'm just going to answer your question from my standpoint. Is like what I would say if that was a client question. So I'm not exactly sure how, the author of this book would talk about it. But from my standpoint, I would say you add it or you group it with something that you're already doing. I think is the easiest thing to do to start with, right? Because we're practicing. I mean, there isn't any right or wrong way to do it. But if you are doing your one push-up, right, we're just going to use that as an example. It would make sense to me, or I would ask the client or you, Pete, when is a time during the day that you think you could get your one push-up in? When does it make the most sense? Maybe you say it's before I brush my teeth, or after I brush my teeth, or before I take my shower, or something that you're already doing every day that's a habit, and trying to tack that onto it. And you may, and I was going to mention this later, and I probably still will, but you may need to be reminded, right? So I still think it's important, when we talk about these visual reminders, like we did at the beginning of the show, and these tech reminders. I mean, you still have to have it in front of you, but attaching it to something that you're already doing, I think, is a good place to start.
And that is exactly BJ Fogg's perspective. And he's a behavioral scientist at Stanford, a behavioral psychologist.
On.
Yes. And so
I passed.
And not only that, he's talking specifically about push-ups and how he started doing push-ups, and he attached it to pee. He said, every time I go pee, I'm going to finish my business and I'm going to do one push-up. And he said, it doesn't take long before you're doing like 4 or 5 push-ups. Depending if I want to work out harder, I drink more water throughout the day. And I'm doing 4, 5, 6 push-ups throughout the day, maybe more. And eventually it's to the point where that tiny habit of doing 1 push-up after I pee, I can do 2 push-ups in the same amount of time that it used to take me to do 1 push-up. So now I'm doing 10, 12 push-ups a day. And eventually you have not only integrated a habit, you're integrating a new behavior, and you're seeing the physical results of this new behavior. And that's how a tiny habit is integrated into your day. So I think what you just nailed it, that having this, and it's supported by science, that integrating these little tiny habits into your day with something that you already do that is totally benign, like going to the bathroom, that is a great way to integrate these habits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and something going back to the book is that, he does go into greater detail in the book. He has like a whole like strategy program and rules built around your mini habit. I think, and what that's for is to build exactly what you're saying, that 1 push-up now goes into 2 push-ups, and then it goes into 3. And but there's this quote that I love. I just thought, again, it's positive. There's some real positive things about this book, but it basically says, many habits have made me feel unstoppable. Prior to starting many habits, I felt unstartable.
Oh, that's really nice.
And I just, I read that like 3 or 4 times, because I was like, how many times are people just frustrated that they can't get started? And so this little mini habit gets you started. And that's what I love about this, is that you start to feel more confident, and, you're taking more positive actions, and you're getting closer to your goals. And I've talked to actually a couple of clients about this this week, because of course when you read something, it's fresh in your mind, and you bring it up to everybody. And but that's what I love about it, is that it keeps people from being in that stuck mode to, hey, I only did 1 push-up, but you did something, you started, you did it, you're not stuck, you're still moving forward. And I really like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's that's kind of the premise of the book. And like I said, there's lots of strategies and such there that you can do. But that's where I would suggest people, when they're looking back at our self-care series and they're seeing all these great things, pick one strategy, one thing that you really want to work on, and find out, what is your 1 push-up, right? That's what we want to look at, is what's your 1 push-up? What can you do? And be clear. And one thing I wanted to be clear is, it's not 1 mini habit for every single topic. Like, just pick 1 topic, one habit.
Yes.
Again, start really small, really, really, really small.
Because it's excited. You start collecting habits. You start thinking, well, if it's just going to be a little bit of action, I can do a lot of little things. Yeah. And then you get totally overwhelmed. It's like notifications. It's like Facebook. It's like whatever.
Yeah. We don't want to do 1 glass of water, 1 push-up, and I'm going to go to bed 5 minutes early.
Right.
No, let's not do all 3. Let's just pick on 1. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting, and this will be my last kind of thought of the book, is that if he said you need to be doing this every day. There shouldn't be any excuses. Like, you have to pick something that you can do every single day. And so if you are starting to have resistance to something, like you really can't do it for whatever reason or excuse that you're putting in your head, then your habit is too big. You got to break it down even smaller. And I thought that was, that's nice. I mean, I think that's good, because if, again, going back to 15 minutes, if that's too much, then go down to 5.
If 1 push-up is too much, maybe you go to the bathroom and then just lay down on the floor on your face for a few minutes.
Exactly.
Maybe that's all you can do. You don't actually push up. You just get down and just start there.
And then maybe tomorrow you'll push up.
That's
I don't
my
know.
Speed.
That's right. But I thought that's a really good rule of thumb, is if you've got resistance coming, figure out where that's coming from and fix it, change it, tweak it, practice it.
Well, speaking of daily behaviors, have you started your day 1 journaling project yet?
No. And I'm just being honest. I've got some projects I'm working on that are taking all of my time right now.
Well, that is totally fair. I just think that one, that's what I think of when I think of these daily habits, is this, what is the daily habit that you can do? And we talked last week about, taking Facebook off your phone. Stop checking Facebook and replace it with something else small.
Well, and Pete, I've got to tell you, I'm not doing that, but I did have a client tell me this week that she started doing that. that, and it's been really great for her.
Oh,
So
I'm so
that
glad.
suggestion is really helping people. So I want to throw that out there that yes, that somebody is doing that.
Somebody is doing that, for crying out loud. Well, it's one of those. It is a tiny habit in itself, and that is the connection, I think, for me, is you've replaced something that was not getting you anywhere, and you're replacing it with something that maybe is changing the way you think about the world around you in a small way. But those small things add up. So right. I've got a link to the book that you're talking about in the show notes. I also put a link to BJ Fogg actually talking about his his P push-up strategy. It was a TED Talk, and it's really great, mostly because of the way he celebrates when he's finished. And I'm not you will start doing it. I guarantee it. If you watch it, you will start the BJ Fogg mantra every time you finish a tiny habit. I promise you will. So head over to takecontroladhd.com and watch this little video. It's very funny and very cute. Yes, that's all I have.
All right.
Thank you so much, Nikki Kinzer. Thank you so much for your time and attention this week. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we will catch you next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.